He iti hoki tō mokoroa, nāna I kākati tika hekatea. I wanted to start with this whakatauki because it represents that perseverance and determination will see us succeed in the most unlikely of circumstances. So I hope that you'll recall the intention of this whakatauki when things might seem a little hopeless. Kia ora koutou, he mātanga rapuara, ko Nell tōku ingoa. In this video, I'm going to explain the different types of interviews, how employers might assess you, how you can prepare to give yourself the best chance of success, what to expect during a job interview, and what to do afterwards. Before we jump into today's kaupapa, we'll go over some general job interview considerations. What thoughts or feelings come to mind when you think of job interviews? Put your reactions in the comments below. Maybe you're anticipating being put under a spotlight or being judged by a large panel of people asking you intense questions, and this can make you feel quite nervous, anxious, and overwhelmed. When you get more experienced with interviews, you'll become more familiar with what to expect and more confident with presenting yourself in a positive and friendly way. It's normal to be anxious, nervous, and stressed before an interview, but the important thing is how you manage those feelings. Some research shows that stress can enhance performance.
Stress is destructive until the moment we believe it isn't. Changing the way you think about stress changes the effect stress has on your body. Kelly says, the best way to manage stress isn't to reduce it or avoid it, but rather to rethink and even embrace it. The new science shows that changing your mind about stress can make you healthier and happier. A study from Columbia University in 2014 had half the participants watch a video that explained that stress is enhancing. It was a 3-minute video that opened with, most people think that stress is negative, but actually research shows that stress is enhancing. The video went on to describe how stress can improve performance. The other half of participants watched a video that said, most people know that stress is negative, but research shows that it's even more debilitating than you expect. The video went on to describe that stress is harmful for performance. Both videos cited real research, but the participants that watched the stress is enhancing video had significantly better results in a job interview that followed.
I encourage you to do your own research about the physiology of stress hormones and decide for yourself if you can learn to use that knowledge to your advantage. You'll get plenty of opportunities to test and practice what works for you during your time at university. When the time comes for a job interview, you'll know how to turn pressure into your superpower so you can be confident in your ability to perform well. And it might be helpful to remember that interviewers can be nervous as well. Recruiting can be just as stressful as job searching, so both parties want the interview to go well. Often there is more than one person sitting on the panel, but it usually won't be a large crowd, and employers are not trying to make you feel as though you're being interrogated under a spotlight. They'll be working hard to make you feel comfortable so they can see the best of you. So an interview panel tends to look a bit more like this these days: welcoming, friendly, and genuinely interested. And they're interested in you, not just your qualification. You're not just bringing your qualification to work. All of your identities are coming with you, and employers are interested in those diverse perspectives. So what's your worldview? What are your ideas? How are you going to challenge them to do things more efficiently, economically, ethically, and conveniently? How are you going to contribute to their goals? They aren't expecting you to save the world. I once changed the colour of the paper in one of the printer trays in the office to differentiate the highest priority information. This made a process more efficient and convenient for 30 staff and many of our clients. So even a small improvement can have a big impact. The employer is looking for the potential impact you'll have as part of their team and company. Recruitment is an expensive and timely exercise, so if you've been invited for an interview, they're already interested in you. It's an exchange of information, so although they'll be asking most of the questions, it's not just about them gaining more knowledge about you. The questions they ask, the way they treat you, and the way they behave are all great indicators which signify whether this is an environment you'll enjoy being in. If they're treating you poorly, are you willing to take the risk of being treated that way every day should you get offered the job? If not, you don't have to accept. In our observation, this doesn't happen very often, but if you find yourself in that situation, don't take it as a personal insult. View it as information to help you make a decision about whether you'll feel like a valued employee in that environment. So it's in yours and the employer's best interests to make sure the opportunity and the organisation are the right fit for you. It's a two-way assessment. Interviews can be biographical with questions like, tell us about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? They're trying to get to know you. There's usually some behavioural-based questions that'll be something like, tell me about a time when you've worked as part of a team with people from diverse backgrounds. Case interviews will involve a real-world situation you might encounter in a typical day in the job. They'll likely ask you to talk about how you might approach that task or situation. These methods of interviewing are all quite common. Regardless of the interview type, it can be useful to prepare in the same way so that you'll feel confident regardless of the environment. Depending on what works for you, you might do a phone interview in your uri with notes to refer to. If you do choose to do that, then lay your notes out so they can't hear paper shuffling at the other end of the phone. If you're like me, you might prefer to still dress as though they can see you. This can help you adopt a more professional mindset or activate your stress-induced performance-enhancing superpowers. If you're participating in a phone interview, find a nice quiet private setting to avoid any background noise from distracting you or the person on the other end. This is also worth considering for Zoom or Teams interviews. With online interviews, make sure your background represents the impression you'd like to portray. There's a room in the careers office that you can book for your online and phone interviews if you wish. Email us to see if it's available. With recorded interviews, you're usually given a question and then some time to consider your answer before you have to record and submit it. Some of these apps will allow you to practice, but others won't. These can feel quite awkward because you don't get any feedback from facial expressions to let you know how well you're doing or whether the interviewer is losing interest. So to help you put your best foot forward, you've got access to an interview simulator called Interview 360. You can choose to practice an auto-generated interview where you'll get asked common job interview questions at random, or you can customise your experience by selecting the questions you'd like to practice. You can also have the software ask you questions based off your own uploaded CV. Interview 360 can record you answering questions and then give instant feedback on how you're coming across on camera. It includes heaps of tips and advice about how to do well in job interviews, but here's a few tips to get you started. Visualise the employer sitting in front of you. You might like to put up a picture of your favourite place or person that makes you smile. Put it right next to the camera to remind you where to look. Remember to vary the tone of your voice so you don't become monotone. If your space allows, you might like to stand up to inject more energy into your voice. With face-to-face interviews, be mindful of your facial expressions and body language. If you're unsure of the locally accepted postures and mannerisms, do some research about the culture and pay attention to the interviewers so you can mirror them. Employers assess you on everything they can observe. Your presentation includes everything from your hair to what shoes you're wearing. So be conscious of how you're presented and whether that matches what will be suitable in the environment you're going into. Always dress slightly more formally than they might be to show you've made some effort and also to give yourself a buffer in case you've underestimated how formal the environment might be. Carry a presence and attitude that match. Show enthusiasm, friendliness and professionalism in both your demeanour and the answers you give. They'll be paying attention to your communication style, but they won't be expecting a perfectly scripted movie star. I might be presenting fully formed sentences and paragraphs smoothly in this video, but I've had the luxury of a script and being edited. Employers will be looking at how well you can hold a conversation, not whether you can articulate perfectly structured, sound logic first time, every time. Find out as much as you can about the employer so you can talk about why you're interested in them rather than the dozens of other companies out there who are doing similar work. Practice some interview questions so that you can answer fully and confidently no matter what they ask. Think about how you'll respond if they ask a question you're not prepared for. The amount of preparation that you've done will show in the interview and is another way of demonstrating that you're keen enough to do the required mahi. You're in a great position to influence employers with the questions you ask. So if there's something that's particularly important to you, ask them about it. Find out how they're supporting rainbow communities or how they're being inclusive of other minority groups. Ask about the diversity of their staff. Do they know what percentage of staff represent different gender identities? You can ask the same questions about their clients. Ask whatever questions you need to know that all of your identities will be welcome in that space. Once you're confident about whether or not you can bring your whole self to work, you can make a well-informed decision about whether you'll accept if you receive an offer. The same thing applies for any identity or anything that's important to you. Many employers in Aotearoa will ask a question about te tiriti or waitangi, or they might talk about bicultural competence. Ask that question back to them. Or if climate solutions are important to you, ask what they're doing to contribute to those solutions. You're the current and future workforce, so ask about the things that matter to you. You can influence them to review their policies and processes to suit the needs of the current labour force and shape the labour market for the future. This is an example of an interview assessment form. Some of the variables might change depending on what the employer is looking for, but this gives you an idea of how employers might grade candidates against their criteria. Prepare for your interview in stages, starting with the basics. You should receive the details of your interview in your invitation. Pay attention in case the location is different to where the company is based. Test run how you'll arrive at the interview to see how long it takes and check out parking options. If the company hasn't provided the name of the interviewers, phone them to ask, then look those people up on LinkedIn to gauge an initial perception of them. You might discover something interesting that you can make conversation about when you meet in person. Check that the clothes you want to wear are clean and ironed. If you have no clothes that are suitable for a job interview, Dress for Success might be able to help. You can find the link in the description below. Reread the job ad, position description, and your application to refresh your memory about how you demonstrated the things they're looking for. Review the relevant skills, abilities, strengths, and experiences you have that you can reinforce during the interview. Consider the specific reasons why this role and this company appeal to you and think about how you fit with what they're wanting. Finding the information you need should be a structured step-by-step process. Research the role and the company. You might like to consider which current and future challenges and opportunities are impacting the industry, the company, and the role. And think about how the role, the company, and the industry are contributing to or could be contributing to those challenges and taking advantage of the opportunities. When researching the role and company, see if you can identify any skills that might be more important given what you now know about the employer. Look for clues to help you understand the culture and personalities that exist within the organisation. Consider what might be happening in the industry. During your research, see if you can spot any impacts of artificial intelligence, climate solutions, or equity. What might these impacts be in the future of this industry? To research the organisation, start with the essentials: the company's history, its product lines, its customers and clients, recent developments, and details of any new projects or innovations. You could even try to find out what the IT infrastructure looks like if that's something that's important to you. What apps do they use? How secure is their network? Will the necessary technology be available to you to be able to do your job? The culture of a company usually starts with its founder or CEO and filters down. Find out as much as you can about the people running the organisation, their background and values. Find out about the main trends and developments taking place in the industry right now. What sort of reputation does the industry have? For example, is it heavily dominated by one gender? If so, are they working on balancing that out? What does your research tell you about their approach to diversity and inclusivity? Who are the main players, and where does your employer sit within this ecosystem? Are they a local, national, or international company? How do politics, economies, and social factors influence their work? You'll have done some research already when preparing your CV and cover letter, but start your research by rereading the job ad, the position description, and your application. Look at the company website to remind yourself of their values, objectives, mission statement, and current projects they're working on. As well as reading the About Us section, see if there are any bios of the key decision makers. Skim the annual report for any details of the firm's strategy and future ambitions. You might like to contact someone who works there or worked there recently to find out what the company culture is like, or the HR team might be able to offer some insight. Check professional body websites for any recent news in the industry. Look for articles on LinkedIn or other social media apps. This can be a great way to get a feel for what the employer is thinking and doing and what the culture might be like. Read updates and posts and check out the profiles of key stakeholders. And finally, Google the industry and the company to see if they've been in the general news recently. Was that coverage positive, negative, or neutral? Did they respond to that news story? If so, was their response in line with their values? Of course, every industry and employer is different, but this list should provide a solid framework to build your research around. Information will differ from place to place and will sometimes be out of date, so remember to vary your sources as much as possible. While you're conducting your research, you'll come up with numerous questions. Write them down as they arise, so you can refer back to them later and see if you've discovered the answer, or if they'll make it onto the list you'll take to the interview. Order them by priority in context with this stage of the recruitment process. You won't be expected to know everything about a company as if you've worked there for several years, but you will be expected to know the basics. A lot of the other research is beneficial to you in deciding whether you'll accept the role if it's offered to you. Some examples of questions you might like to ask are, what would a typical day or week be like for a new staff member? How would you describe the culture of the team and the company? What do you see as the biggest challenges and opportunities for the industry in the next 5 years? If you're applying for a job within the company you already work at, it can be quite hard to think of questions to ask because the interviewers will know that you already have that information. So have a think about some out-of-the-box questions you could ask, like, if $1 million were added to your team budget right now, what would you do with it? Their answer can tell you a lot about the current individual, team and company priorities. We'd love to hear your suggestions for questions like this, so pop them in the comments below. Most of the questions you'll be asked at the interview fall into 3 categories. These are, who are you, what can you do for us, and why do you want to work for us? The questions might come in the form of behavioural-based questions, something like, tell me about a time when you went above and beyond your expected tasks while working on a project. Use the STAR technique to help you provide a structured answer. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the STAR technique, it stands for situation, task, action, and result. For example, when I worked at McDonald's, a customer came back to complain that a burger had been left out of their order. I had to complete the order and figure out how to turn this negative experience into a positive one for the customer. I immediately apologised for the inconvenience and gave them a fresh burger to complete their meal and another free burger for their trouble. The customer was grateful to be heard and have a spare burger which they chose to share with their friend. They became regular customers who I developed an easy, friendly rapport with over the time that I worked there. You might be asked some technical questions. So things like, how did your degree prepare you for this job? What coding language are you most comfortable with? What do you do to stay up to date with your technical certifications and knowledge? Fit questions are designed to see how you'll fit in with the team and the culture of the organisation. These might be like, when working in a team, which role are you most likely to play? How would past co-workers best describe your work style? How do you like to be managed? Motivational questions aim to identify how you'll be motivated. Something like, what motivates you to go to work every day? Tell me about a time where you went above and beyond your role and expectations. Why did you do this? Interviewers will use probing questions or follow-up questions if they haven't got enough information from you in your initial answer. Unusual questions might be things like, what was your favourite toy as a child? If you were an animal, which one would you be? When you answer these questions, provide your reasoning. They fall into the category of who are you and give some insight into how you see yourself or how you'd like to be seen. Create a preparation checklist for yourself. It might look something like this, with sections for basic checks, interviewer checks, and company research. You might include sections for industry research and role research as well. You might also like to include some notes about how you'll behave or mannerisms you'd like to modify, and maybe even what you'll wear. A section for noting down questions could be useful too. On the day, first impressions count. If you're confident in your appearance, that's one less thing to be nervous about. Project friendliness, professionalism and confidence by being aware of your posture and facial expressions. Punctuality for a job interview in New Zealand is considered to be about 10 minutes early, just long enough to settle your nerves by getting comfortable in the unfamiliar surroundings and rereading your job application and any notes you've made. Maintain a suitable level of eye contact. In New Zealand, eye contact should be maintained directly and intermittently broken. People often make enough eye contact to show their sincerity, but don't hold the gaze for too long, as this can seem scrutinising. For some Pacific Islanders and Māori, direct eye contact can be considered disrespectful and confrontational. Observe the interviewer's behaviour towards you and between the panel and mirror that. You can learn more about cultural norms in Aotearoa using the Cultural Atlas link in the description below. Nerves are natural and might make you forget things, so bring pen and paper to take notes. Nerves can also make us ramble, so pay attention to the interviewer's body language and facial expressions. Wrap things up by asking, has that answered your question? Or saying, sorry if I rambled. Also, bring a fresh copy of your CV. If you don't understand a question, it's absolutely fine to ask for clarification. This can be a good technique to adopt if they ask something which might be ethically questionable. By now, you should be confident talking about examples of your achievements and experiences which show you've had success in the past. Try to emphasise 3 key things that you'd like the interviewers to remember about you and that are relevant to the role. Practice promoting yourself so you can learn to do this comfortably. Remember your list of questions. Don't ask questions they've already answered for the sake of asking questions. It'll look like you haven't listened. So have a lot of questions prepared so that you can ask the most important ones that haven't already been answered. Aim to ask about 3 to 5 questions. A typical interview structure will start with introductions, meet and greet, small talk, setting the tone. This will generally be followed by some opening questions which should be pretty easy to answer. The interviewers will be trying to help you relax. Some behavioural-based questions might follow that, and then perhaps some procedural-based questions such as when might you be available to start. The interview will conclude after they've invited you to ask your questions. If they don't wrap up by explaining what the next steps are and an expected time frame, then ask and always thank the interviewers for their time. You often walk out of an interview and think of better examples you could have used or different wording to make yourself clearer. Write those things down so that even if you're unsuccessful, you've got a better chance of performing well at the next one. If you do get invited to the next stage, you'll be well prepared to reinforce some of the things that you said and clarify some of the things that maybe you didn't express so well before. If you're unsuccessful, politely ask for feedback. You could say something like, "I'm disappointed that I was unsuccessful, but I appreciate you taking the time to consider me for the role. Can you offer me some feedback to increase my chances of success in the future?" They might have simply found the successful candidate to have been a better fit with their team, so their feedback might confirm that you performed well during the interview. Even though you might really want the job, if you don't get it, you won't have lost anything. So at the very least, an interview is really good practice and great professional development. So make the most of the opportunity by doing the post-interview self-review. Check out our YouTube playlist called Job Interview Tips from Employers to hear their advice about how to do well in interviews. We've got heaps of resources to help you with everything I've talked about in this video. All of the links I've referred to are listed in the description below. We have a heap of employer information in the office that you can browse at your convenience. It's usually information about the company or about the graduate positions, internships and summer opportunities they might offer. You can collect a copy of your guide to job hunting in the office or access the sections you need online. I know I've talked about a lot of variables today and it can be difficult to bring all of those things together. So please feel free to book an appointment with myself or my Waimarie Dave to get some help with it. We also run drop-in sessions every day from 10 a.m. till 12 noon where we can spend 10 minutes answering any quick questions you have. If you found the video helpful, give us a like and share it with someone else who might need it. We welcome your suggestions, questions and feedback, so drop something in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Kara whiwa.